Tomatoes, one of the most popular starter plants for all gardeners, novices and experts. Now there's a few reasons for that. They're very easy to grow, they're very easy to transplant, but more importantly, the seeds are very, very easy to collect. So today, I want to show you how I save my own heirloom tomato seeds. Now, tomatoes are one of the best plants to save your seeds from, and the reason for that is they are self-pollinators. Now, what that means is that the flower on the plant can pollinate itself within that flower or from another flower on the same plant. Now, why is this important? Well, for heirloom tomatoes, where you do not want to cross the genetics with another plant that is not the same variety, that is, you want the seeds to germinate true every year so you know what you're going to get. This is important because the tomatoes, being self-pollinators, won't cross-pollinate with all the other tomato varieties in your garden. You can't really do that with peppers. With peppers, you got to keep them isolated or you'll start getting crosses. And so I believe every organic gardener should try and at least save their own tomato seeds. So with saving seeds, there's always one rule that I always follow, and that is I only save seeds from known heirlooms. That is, in the rare instances where I would get a hybrid tomato plant or a hybrid package of seeds, from either the garden center or wherever, I would not save the seeds from those fruits in that season. Because when you go to germinate them the following year, you'll have no idea what you're going to get. So the process for saving your tomato seeds is about 5 days to a week. But the bulk of that time is just waiting for the seeds to ferment. So let's quickly go through the materials that you're going to need to save your own tomato seeds. Now you're only going to need 3 things. It's very simple. You need your bucket for your tomato seeds to go into. You need another bucket for the carcasses, the seedless hollowed out tomato bits. And the last thing you need is your fingers for squishing them. So let me show you how I do the first step. So when you're saving multiple varieties of tomato seeds, you want to label your containers, obviously, because they all look the same and you could easily get them mixed up. So today I'm doing 2 varieties. I'm doing Tiny Tim, which is a bush cherry tomato, and then I'm doing an heirloom Roma, which, as you know, is sort of an oblong paste tomato. Now, I do 9 different heirloom tomato varieties here on the farm. And now, every year, for each variety, I save about 12,000 seeds. Now, the reason for that is I sell and distribute the seeds, in the fall, the winter, and the early spring. Plus, I also do hundreds and hundreds of starter plants for sale at my farm stand. So, I obviously save a few more seeds than the average gardener. Over the last 4 years, I've been able to calculate for each variety of tomato that I do, how many I have to do to get to 12,000 seeds. Now for this Tiny Tim here, I've calculated on average, when I squish one of these guys, I'll get about 80 seeds. Now of course there'll be some where I only get 40, there's some where I get 120 or 130. But on average, I get about 80 seeds for each one of these guys. And so I know that if I want to get to 12,000 seeds, roughly, I need to squish 150 of these guys. And so I know each one of these deli cups, holds roughly about 30 squished Tiny Tims. So if I need 150, I know I need to do 5 of these deli cups today. Not a problem. Now the Roma's, completely different variety. There's not nearly the number of seeds in Roma tomatoes as there is most varieties. Roma is a paste tomato. There's very little liquid and often there's very little seeds. So I calculated probably about 30 seeds per roma. So if I want to get to 12,000 seeds for these romas, I'm going to need to do 400 of them. Now, because there's so little juice and there's so little guts and so little seeds, I can actually fit about 100 romas in here. So when it comes time to calculating how many containers I need to do, I only need to do 4 for the romas. So even though I'm only doing 2 varieties today, I got a lot of tomatoes to get through. So let me show you this first stage here, which is basically the seed collecting. We'll do it for this bucket of Tiny Tim, and then I'll show you how I set up those seeds for the second stage. So the first step is collecting your seeds. It's really easy. All you gotta do is just squish them into the bucket. Try and get as many as you can. You're not gonna get them all. And then you just dump your carcass in your carcass bucket and continue on. Now, sometimes with these cherry tomatoes, you'll get them when they're so full of juices and you go to squish them and it's just chaos. It's just seeds and juice everywhere. So what I like to do, if I feel it, I know it's going to be one of those ones that pop, I'll make a little hole in it or a slit so that's where the seeds will come out. I determine where they come out, and you can point that hole down into your bucket and just squish. Makes it a lot easier and a lot cleaner. So I'll go ahead and do the rest of these Tiny Tims for this bucket, and then I'll show you how you set up the bucket for stage 2. Now when you're doing these tomatoes, you want to pick the ripest ones possible. Because we are fermenting the seeds, you might as well get ones that have already started to ferment in the fruit itself. So that's from only 2 of the Tiny Tim cherry tomatoes. So now that you've collected all your seeds, with as little pulp and with as little meat and little juice from the tomato as possible, you really want just the seeds. Now what you got to do is you got to add water. Now, you can use rainwater, you can use tap water, but it has to be clean. We want these seeds to ferment in this water, but we don't want there to be bits of soil and debris in there where the seeds could actually germinate. So you just go ahead, add your water. There you go. So that was step 1, done. Step 2 takes about 3 to 5 days where the tomatoes sit in this water and they ferment. Now the reason why we ferment them is because we want to get the little bits of tomato meat and pulp off of these seeds and out of the water. And so probably every 36 hours, I'll dump this out and then put more water in. The great thing about this, the interesting thing about the step 2 is that the viable seeds will actually sink to the bottom. And most of the pulp and debris likes to float to the top. So it's very, very easy to keep getting this clean by dumping off the top debris and the seeds that aren't going to germinate. And so time-wise, the reason why I say 3 to 5 days is completely dependent on temperature. So depending on when you're doing this in the season, if you're waiting to the end of the season to collect all your tomatoes for seeds, it might be cooler. It could take 5 or 6 days for these to properly ferment. But if you're pulling your tomatoes for seeds, in the middle of the hot summer, it could be only 2 to 3 days for the entire process to be done. So we'll let these guys sit for about 3 days, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to extract the seeds from the solution. All right, so it's day 2. These guys are fermenting nicely. This morning I dumped off the top debris. A lot of the debris rose to the top. I screened it off. Most of the seeds have sunk to the bottom, so it was easy to get rid of this water. I'm going to replace it one more time. And I think tomorrow afternoon possibly the morning after, the seeds will then be ready to dry out. So let's get as much of this water out of here as possible and then add some fresh stuff. Try to get the debris out, but not the seeds itself. Okay, now we'll add our last batch of water. There, as you can see, there's even less of the tomato bits, the meat, the flesh of the tomato. It's mostly just water and seeds at this point. So when we strain it off tomorrow, we'll wash the seeds, maybe a couple of times, and that'll be it. It'll just be seeds. So now we've reached the second stage of saving your own tomato seeds. And all you need for this is a sink. I've been relegated to my basement sink because apparently this is too messy. But anyway, and you need a pretty fine strainer. Now, I don't like to go too fine like this one. I think this is for tea or something like that. I do like to go just a bit smaller than the seeds so that if there is any remaining parts of the tomato flesh, it does get rinsed through. Because you really want these seeds as clean as possible. So one, they don't mold, and two, you don't want them to germinate. So all I do, take my seeds and just pour them through here and just rinse them off in the sink. And there you go. Perfectly clean tomato seeds. There's about 200 there. So let's move on to the third and final stage of saving your tomato seeds, and that's drying them out. So for the last stage here, to dry out your seeds, I find it best just to use a clean sheet of newspaper. You can use regular newspaper, unprinted newsprint. Most paper products do work. I would steer clear from paper towels because the seeds will stick and it'll be very, very hard to get them out once they dry. So you just want to take your seeds, make sure they're all out of the strainer. And so you want to spread them around the newspaper so they're only a single layer high, so none of them get buried, and that they can all dry evenly. So we'll leave these guys here probably for about, I'd say at least 24 hours. We'll come back and we'll collect them. Alright, so I've collected all the dried seeds and I've placed them in a labeled deli cup. Now these guys will keep for about 2 years, probably longer, but I do try to use them up and replace them every 2 years. You want to store these, in a cool, dry, dark place. But other than that, they are really low maintenance. So that's really all that's involved with saving your tomato seeds. It is an easy 3-step process that can save you a ton of money every season. And not only that, you get to keep the best genetics of the best varieties that grow the best in your garden. Realistically, if I didn't save my own tomato seeds, this farm probably would have went bankrupt 5 years ago. So, as always, guys, leave any questions or comments down below. Do you save your seeds? You know, do you do it in a different method? Do you have another step that maybe I skipped? Or do you think saving seeds is a waste of time and energy? Would you rather just go down to the store or order them online and have a new variety of tomatoes every summer? Let me know what you guys do. All right, thanks guys. Click subscribe if you haven't already. For those of you that have, I really do appreciate the support, and I'll see you guys next time.